بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأزواجه وذرياته وأصحابه ومن والاه وبعد فالحمد لله ثم الحمد لله. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the exalted for another blessing and another opportunity to be able to have life on such a beautiful day today, on the day of Jumu'ah, to be able to make sajda to Allah, to come to His house, spend a few moments even after the prayer to remember Him and hopefully to benefit inshallah from one another. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. I'm sure the past couple of sessions, last week's khutbah, this week's khutbah, maybe some khatiras after prayer, are speaking about the importance of maintaining what we were able to accomplish in Ramadan. And I hope we take that as a genuine reminder and not just something that, again, we get used to. The reminder is beneficial for the believer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and remind one another because reminder is beneficial for the believer. This is the caveat. Reminder is beneficial not just for the human being and not for the disbeliever, not for the arrogant person, but for the believer. That when someone has genuine faith, they could never get tired of hearing something about Allah. They could never get tired about hearing something about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they could never feel like it's useless to hear something that they maybe even heard before already. It's beneficial because it's a reminder. It's good words. So after Ramadan, we have to maintain our practice. One of the ways that our Prophet ﷺ did this, as we all probably have heard the famous hadith that man sama Ramadan wa atba'ahu sitta min Shawwal kana ka siyam ad-dahr. Whoever fasts the month of Ramadan and he follows it up with 6 days fasting in Shawwal, then it's as if he fasted for the entire year. It becomes like a perpetual fast. And this is from Allah's mercy that you could show up in the hereafter and get the reward as if you fasted for your entire life while enjoying your lunch and dinner and snack and coffee and tea and all that good stuff. But you get the reward as if you were fasting your entire life simply because you adhered to this advice of the Prophet ﷺ that you fasted the month of Ramadan, which is a faridah, it's an obligation, and then you were, mashallah, committed enough to also fast 6 days of Shawwal. Now, there's another narration in the collection of the Sahih of Ibn Khuzaymah rahimahullah, where the Prophet ﷺ kind of explains what this hadith or how this hadith becomes like fasting your entire life. Siyamu shahri Ramadan bi asharati ashhur. That when you fast the month of Ramadan, it's like you fasted for 10 months. How so? Because we know that al-hasanat bi ashri amthaliha, that deeds are multiplied by at least 10. So to fast 1 month, you've already gotten the reward like you fasted 10 months. And then you have وَصِيَامُ سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ بِشَهْرَيْنِ. And then the reward of fasting 6 days is as if you fasted for 2 months. How so? Because 6 days times 10 is 60 days. That's 2 months. So now, فَذَلِكَ صِيَامُ السَّنَةِ. That becomes fasting the whole year. And then if someone does this regularly, then they get the reward as if they had a perpetual fast throughout their life. This is from Allah's mercy, and He gives this tawfiq to whoever He wills. Now, the question that could be kind of come to mind is that if this is kind of the mathematics behind it, then you can fast 6 days anytime throughout the year and get the reward as if you fasted for the whole year, correct? Why does it have to be specific in Shawwal? Whoever fasts 6 days in Shawwal, right? So, in theory, you can fast 6 days anytime throughout the year before the next Ramadan, and you'll get the reward as if you fasted for the whole year, because you get that reward times 10. So then there's a deeper kind of understanding here also, that one of the wisdoms behind this hadith is the Prophet ﷺ is trying to teach us that you should hasten towards good deeds. You should hasten towards good deeds and don't put off the opportunity to get hasanat and good deeds for tomorrow if you could do it today. Right? Because we're not guaranteed that we're going to live until the next Ramadan, but we would not want this chance to pass us by. So hasten towards the fasting of those 6 days, especially since we're still in the mode of Ramadan. We're still in the mood of Ramadan. We just got done fasting for 30 days, so it shouldn't be as difficult for us to fast now because we're fresh off of fasting. So we're still kind of used to it. And this is why one of the great scholars and muhaddithin, Shah Waliullah ad-Dahlawi rahimahullah, when he comments on this hadith, he says that these 6 days of Shawwal, they're bimanzilati sunan al-rawatib. They have the status of like the regular practice, the regular sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ for fasting. So it's normal that when you have an obligation like the prayer, the faridah, that usually it's accompanied with some sunnah, right? So before Fajr you have 2 rakats sunnah. Before Dhuhr you have the 4 rakats and 2 rakats. After Maghrib, after Isha you have 2 rakats. Why? Also, this is another wisdom. You just got done praying. You're in a state of wudu already. You're already like in an area of prayer, sometimes in the masjid. You are already, mashallah, in a good spiritual state. Is it really that difficult in that moment after you pray to stand up and pray 2 more rakats? It's not. So the Prophet ﷺ, he established that practice so that we can see that you have to take advantage of those opportunities to do good. When it's really right in front of us, it's for the taking. It's like low-hanging fruit. We all want to be better. We would all love to pray more. But it's a lot more difficult, for example, at 10:30 a.m. to stop what you're doing at work, to go and make a fresh wudu and then to pray 2 rakats, than it is after dhuhr. Because after dhuhr, you just got done praying anyways. You're already in a state of wudu because you have to pray. To stand up and pray 2 rakats at that point is usually easier to accomplish. So the fasting of the 6 days of Shawwal, it's similar to this. You just got done fasting, you should now fast a few extra days. This is like the sunnah fasting after the faridah. Now, but additionally, as I was saying, one of the wisdoms is not just that, but it's to hasten towards good deeds. If you really want to get the fasting of a whole year, then don't put it off because we're not guaranteed that we'll be around until the next Ramadan to get those 6 days of fasting in. So Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وسارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض أعدت للمتقين. That hasten and race towards forgiveness from your Lord and a paradise the breadth of which is the heavens and the earth. Hasten and race towards this. وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافِسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. That for good deeds and for paradise and for Jannah, these are the things that people should race and compete for. These are the things that we should challenge ourselves for. We get so competitive when it comes to things of the world. We want to win our basketball tournament. We want to win our tennis tournament. We want to, mashallah, be the highest earner at our company. We want to be, mashallah, the highest earner in our family, more than all of our cousins and our siblings. We want to be the ones, mashallah, who are able to be the most successful in whatever profession it is that we endeavor into. Rather, we should be competing in gaining Allah's pleasure. And we should race towards that. So to now fast the 6 days specifically in Shawwal, when in theory, you can fast at any time of the year and get the Kasiyam Dahr, it's specific for the month of Shawwal. We should do it in this month because you should hasten towards it. Now, this then leads to a kind of a conversation about fiqh. I wanted to share kind of also a fiqhi discussion as in regards to like when you should fast those 6 days. Should you do them immediately after Ramadan, consecutively, as quickly as possible? Because after all, we're talking about hastening towards good deeds, right? And we don't know if we'll make it to the end of the month also of Shawwal to be able to fast the 6 days. So should we take care of it like immediately after Ramadan? Is that better? Or should you space them out throughout the month of Shawwal? Now, the fuqaha, they actually differ about this. And this is, I think, a side point. I think in the past we've had discussions about how we come to the conclusions regarding what the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is. How do we come to conclusions in regards to how we're supposed to best practice Islam? Is it simply quoting the hadith? Because if it is, the hadith says fast 6 days in Shawwal. It doesn't specify then if you should do it right away, if you should space it out in the month. Well, then one might say, well, then it doesn't matter because the Prophet ﷺ didn't specify. Just as long as you do the 6 days. My answer to that is yes, absolutely. As long as you do the 6 days, this is the sunnah. This is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Because he did not specify you should do it right away, you should space it out. So the sunnah is just make sure you get them done. However, we also know in our deen, there are things which are considered optimal and suboptimal. Things which are more preferred that we should try to do. Who determines this? This shows that it's not simply based on the hadith. This is one small example. Because, and it's not something I'm also making up, it's all there in the classical texts. All of the ulama from the early generations, not all of them, but those from whom transmitted the teachings of the sunnah, they commented on these type of things. This was their desire. Because when you really want to follow the Prophet ﷺ, you're going to ask these questions. How can I do it best? Not like the Bani Israel where you become too extreme, like what color is the cow? This is not one of those cases. Because this is after establishing just fast for 6 days, and then there's some details about, okay, what's best practice? So, some of the ulama, for example, they mention that you should fast the 6 days in succession after Ramadan. Because one of the goals is that you should hasten towards good deeds. So you should try to do them right away consecutively, and that would be the most virtuous. Other fuqaha, they have mentioned that it's actually better to space them out throughout Shawwal. That you should not actually do them consecutively. And this is now where, again, you get a kind of a holistic understanding of our deen. You don't understand how, rather I should say, we're not supposed to understand how we practice Islam on an individual level. But you have, meaning you don't just look at one hadith in regards to how you do one practice. But you look at the collective body of the hadith, the collective body of the practice of the Prophet ﷺ, in order to best determine how you are supposed to practice. Because a lot of times there are other hadith which relate to another practice indirectly. I'll give you an example. We all maybe are familiar with, after you pray, when it's time for your sunnah, you'll see sometimes brothers will stand up and want to trade spots with people. Why do they do this? May I ask, anyone can call it out. I don't want to just be here lecturing. I'm not like a, yes. MashaAllah, beautiful. So he's mentioning that on the Day of Judgment, all these different places will testify for you for where you prayed. So you try to pray in all these different places. MashaAllah, well done. Anything else? Is this the common reason why people understand this practice? Allahu Akbar, MashaAllah, ahsan, MashaAllah. You should distinguish between the faridah and the sunnah. You should make a distinction between the obligatory prayer and the sunnah prayer. Whereas if you were to stand up, then it gives the impression as if it's still the faridah. You didn't distinguish between them, right? And this is actually closer to the direct transmission that we saw from our Prophet ﷺ and from the companions. So, أن رجلا دخل إلى مسجد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فصلى الفرض وقام ليتنفل عقب فرضه وهنالك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه فقام إليه عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه فقال له اجلس حتى تفصل بين فرضك ونفلك فبهذا هلك من كان قبلنا فقال الله رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أصاب الله بك يا ابن الخطاب. So Sayyidina Umar and the Prophet ﷺ were once in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ when a person came and he prayed his farida, his obligatory prayer. After he was done praying, he immediately stood up and prayed his nafil and his sunnah. After he was done, Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab approached him and he advised him very, mashallah, respectfully and said, when you finish your obligatory prayer, you should distinguish between your obligatory prayer and your nafil prayer. You know, by changing your posture, by doing something else, not just immediately standing and praying in the same place. Because this is how the people before us were destroyed. What does he mean by that? Is that people will maybe start to get the impression that it's an obligation after you do the obligation that you still have to keep on praying. And then they no longer know what's obligatory and what's nafil and what's sunnah. People became extreme like this. They weren't able to now distinguish, right, the established practice from the obligation. So the Prophet ﷺ went to Sayyidina Umar and said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has conveyed the truth through you, O Ibn al-Khattab. And this was comments of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Meaning, this was something that Sayyidina Umar didn't necessarily learn directly from the Prophet ﷺ. This is an important point too. Sayyidina Umar did something based on his understanding of what the sunnah was, without having learned it directly. What's the indication here is that the Prophet ﷺ is telling that Allah Ta'ala conveyed the truth through you, O Ibn al-Khattab. And then now you have the taqreer of the Prophet ﷺ. He had now the confirmation and approval of doing something that's a form of sunnah also, when the Prophet ﷺ approves something that someone does. And that becomes a sunnah. But the fact that he's saying you conveyed the truth, Allah conveyed the truth through you, O Ibn al-Khattab, shows that it was something that was from his own understanding that happened to be consistent with the sunnah and what was right. Because he knew from the Prophet ﷺ that people were destroyed before him or before them because of adding this practice and adding things to the religion which were not in fact a part of a religion. So, when a person then, what does this have to do with our conversation? This is the istidlal, for example, of scholars like of Imam Abu Yusuf, one of the greatest students of Imam Abu Hanifa, and also Imam Malik rahimahullah, of why you should not fast them consecutively after Ramadan. However, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah was of the opinion that it's best to do them immediately after Eid. You cannot fast on the day of Eid, but after that, it's best to do all 6. So there may be some brothers here, mashallah, maybe some sisters, who already fasted their 6 days. And I remember in one of the communities I used to live in, where it was a predominantly Shafi'i community, a lot of our brothers, mashallah, from Somalia, and a lot of them follow the Shafi'i madhab. The 6 days after Eid, they were all fasting, mashallah. They had iftar at the masjid and everything. This was their practice, because according to one of the scholars, this was most virtuous. And they wanted to continue fasting because they just got done fasting. And they can carry over that momentum from Ramadan. But other fuqaha said it's actually disliked to do that, because now you could give the impression that this is a part of the farida, you have to do it. Like standing in the same place for fard. One last point about even the prayer itself. Al-fasl bayn al-fard wal-nafil, it doesn't have to be moving positions. It could be doing anything which will now completely take you out of salah. It could be turning and facing now the other direction, which the imam does sometimes. It could be sitting for a long enough time and making dhikr, saying salam to the person next to you. Enough time passing to where now you stand up and you pray. You don't have to move positions, as long as there's a distinction between the two prayers. Because sometimes it also even can become disruptive. People next to you are maybe still doing their adhkar, and then now you are like, requesting them to move, and a lot of times they don't mind, but it can still be somewhat disruptive. You don't have to do that, just so we know. As long as you've already distinguished between the fard and the nafil. So again, the other kind of understanding is that you should spread these 6 days out throughout the month of Shawwal. Now, let me now kind of tie it into hastening towards good deeds. One could argue that if the point was to hasten to good deeds, why not do them right away? Why spread them out throughout the month? The month of Shawwal itself is hastening towards the 6 days of fasting. Does that make sense? Otherwise, there's another extreme that people can get into, right? You don't want your hastening towards good deeds to become obsessive, right? That yes, we should hasten towards good deeds. If there's something that you can do today, don't put it off till tomorrow. But let's say it's already like midnight. You're in your getting ready for bed, and you're like, I need to clean the garage. You're like, I don't want to like procrastinate. SubhanAllah, like wait till tomorrow, clean the garage tomorrow. It's not procrastinating. But some people might feel they become excessive in even trying to do something which could technically wait for tomorrow, inshallah. It's not procrastination. The fact that the Prophet ﷺ said, fast these 6 days in the month of Shawwal, even though they could have been spread out throughout the year, is showing us what it means to hasten. To do the 6 days of fasting within that first month. If you complete them within the month, then this is hastening, and this is hastening towards good deeds. So that we don't become obsessive also in trying to like hasten towards good deeds. Because there's one example where a delegation came to Medina Munawwara. And mashallah, upon arrival, you could imagine that this fresh delegation of Muslims arriving from a different city, you could imagine their excitement to be able to go and meet the Prophet ﷺ. For some of them, the first time. There was one particular companion upon arrival, right? As soon as the tribe arrived, they all hastened to go meet the Prophet ﷺ. They all hastened upon arrival, got off their conveyance, got off their camels, and went to go meet the Prophet ﷺ. Some of them didn't even tie their camel. And they were all disheveled because they came from Safar. One companion in particular, he dismounted his conveyance. He properly tied his camel. He went and even properly freshened up, made, if not wudu, he actually made a ghusl and showered, put on his clean clothes, and then he went to the majlis to meet the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he went to go meet him, he was told that Allah loves two things in you that you have, al-hilmu wal-ana, that you're a very tolerant and forbearing person, and you're also very deliberate, al-ana. This is the opposite of being musta'jil. You're not someone who hastens and rushes through things, but you are very deliberate and you are very precise and calculated in your actions, that you don't rush things. So in that case, rushing to see the Prophet ﷺ was a good thing. But to be able to properly prepare yourself, to clean yourself, before going into the majlis with the Prophet ﷺ was actually more loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ. So what does it mean then to hasten when it comes to fasting, for example? The 6 days of Shawwal is you spread it throughout the month. If we do this, then we are counted amongst the people who hasten towards good deeds, and we get the reward as if we fasted like the whole year. So this is kind of one of the wisdoms behind it. The last thing I'll share about this, inshallah, which is also tied into like a bit of a fiqhi discussion. Some of us missed fast in Ramadan, and we have to make them up perhaps because we were sick, maybe we were travelers. And for our sisters, they're certainly going to miss maybe at least a week of fasting that they have to make up. Now, to make up the fast, we should all make sure that we properly track those days that we miss. It is mandatory to make up those fasts. It's wajib. It's fard rather. Wajib fard. Now, if a person, let's say, has, and this is another wisdom of why, for example, we're told to fast those 6 days, is some of our women folk, our wives, our daughters, our mothers, may have to make up their fast. So the Prophet ﷺ is encouraging us that we should fast with them. So that, mashallah, they're not laboring to prepare your breakfast, lunch, and dinner before Maghrib when they themselves are fasting to make up their fasts. So those 6 days are pretty average, and what a sister might have to miss and make up because of her menses in Ramadan. So this is one of the ways now the family can continue to fast together even after Ramadan. Otherwise, let's also now look at this even for the men. If you have days to make up, are you allowed to fast these sunnah days when you have a farida to make up? Right? Are you allowed to? Or must you make up your days that you missed first and prioritize that which is wajib? The fuqaha also differ on this. Right? Because one thing we know is that the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they were known to make up their fasts in the month of Sha'ban. When is Sha'ban? It's the month before Ramadan. Meaning they would put off the making up of their fast for the whole year until the next Ramadan, before the next month of Ramadan began. And they used to do this because they didn't want to be fasting if the Prophet ﷺ ever approached them and wanted to be intimate with them. And if they were fasting, then they would not be able to kind of oblige and meet and fulfill that need of the Prophet ﷺ. So they would, mashallah, refrain from fasting even, because they wanted to be, mashallah, they wanted to be there for the Prophet ﷺ anytime he wanted to be with them. So they knew that when Sha'ban would come, he would actually fast the entire month of Sha'ban. So they knew that he was going to be fasting, so they would make up their fast in the month of Sha'ban. This actually shows us that to delay making up your fasts within the year is permissible. It's jaiz to do that. You don't have to now immediately make it up. That it's wajib and fard ala tarahi, not fawran. So if a person then were to pass away before they're able to make up their fasts, they would not be sinful, inshallah, for delaying the makeup because they didn't delay it excessively. It's almost like if a person, let's say, passed away at 2 p.m. and dhuhr time enters at 1:35. Are they sinful for not praying dhuhr? No, they're not, because they are actually allowed to pray within the time. They didn't know they were going to die at 2 p.m. And if that happened to take place, they're not liable for that prayer or sinful for missing the prayer because it was still within the time. So some of the commentators, they mention that as long as you make it up before the next Ramadan, you're not considered neglectful for delaying it for too long. Now, to build on that, if you're going to then fast the 6 days of Shawwal and delay your makeup days, this is okay. This is allowed to do that. That way you can get those 6 days. Because if you try to fast 6 days of Shawwal and all your makeup days, this could become very difficult. Again, for a sister, let's say, who happened to miss, let's say, 9 days of fasting. Now to couple that with 6 days, that's fasting another half a month after Ramadan. That could be very difficult. For a brother who became ill for 7 days, now he has to now make up 7 days of fasting along with 6 days of Shawwal. That could become very difficult. So they're allowed to focus first on the 6 days of Shawwal and then make up the days they missed after the month of Shawwal. This is one opinion that's accepted. Another opinion is that you can actually combine your intentions. That if you were to make up those days, let's say 6 days that you missed, and have the intention that, oh Allah, accept for me also the 6 days of Shawwal, so you hasten to make up your days of fasting in that month of Shawwal, so that you can also get the 6 days of fasting in Shawwal, that this intention will also be accepted. And you will still get the reward for fasting the 6 days of Shawwal, even if they were make-up days of Ramadan. This becomes now a source of motivation for people to make up their fasts sooner rather than later. That's also a sound opinion. Now, the safest opinion, if a person wanted to, which could be the most kind of difficult, so I say safest in the sense that there's no differences of opinion. It's the safest in that regard, but it's not considered necessarily the best. Is that you make up your days of fasting in the month of Shawwal because they have priority over your Sunnah fast. And then after making up your fasts, you also do the 6 days of Shawwal all in the month of Shawwal. So this could be the most difficult, but not necessarily the most virtuous. But for some people, fasting is, mashallah, something that Allah opened the door of fasting for them. And they're very able to fast. They're already fasting maybe half the month anyways. So they can make up their fast and they can do the 6 days of Shawwal. For them, then maybe it's better to do that. For others who maybe fasting is a little more difficult, try to do your 6 days, but you want to make sure you fast each fast uniquely. Make up your 6 days of fasting in Shawwal, fast the 6 days Sunnah of Shawwal, and make up your days after Shawwal before the next Ramadan. And for the people who fasting may be extremely difficult for, but you want to get your 6 days of Shawwal in, make up all of your fasting days in the month of Shawwal, and they can count towards your 6 days of Shawwal also. I hope that makes it easy. That gives like 3 options. Kind of degree of difficulty would be most difficult, then easiest, and then moderate. It gives 3 kind of options for us depending on where we fall in. All of them, inshallah, we hope from Allah that He will accept. The bottom line is that we try to carry some of this momentum. Fasting is just one example of the good deeds we try to carry on. It's just one example, it's not the only thing. It was specifically mentioned for the fasting so that we know we should try to continue doing other things, inshallah. May Allah Ta'ala make it easy for myself and for all of us and accept all of us. We have a question, inshallah, from Shaykh Saleh. Absolutely. This is another, what we call, mashallah, like sunnah hack, right? So if you got to get these 6 days in, if you fast on a Monday and Thursday, you may regularly do that anyways. You get double the reward. You get the Monday and Thursday sunnah fast along with the 6 days of Shawwal. The same thing with the Ayyamul Bid, the white days or the radiant days. The Prophet ﷺ used to fast in the middle of every month, the 12th, 13th, and 14th, or 13th, 14th, and 15th, when the moon is full. These were known as Ayyamul Bid because when you have a full moon, it's very bright. So they call them the bright days. So if you fast 3 days, you get the double reward of fasting on those days, and now they can count towards the 6 days of Shawwal as well. So then that's something encouraged where you can get double reward, double sunnah, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Any other questions? I know I spoke a little over already. Jazakallah khair. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanakallah wa bihamdihi. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Barakallahu feekum. جزاك الله خير. جزاك الله خير. بارك الله فيكم. الله يتقبل ان شاء الله. الله ما فيه الخير ان شاء الله. كيف الاولاد؟ تمام. الحمد لله كل شيء تمام. طبعا معكم.